Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Friday Morning Devotions. Glad to be spending some time with you this morning. I don't know about you, but the last couple of days in my neck of the woods here in Marion, Indiana, it has been, needless to say, a winter wonderland. There's only one problem. I'm not a Wonderland fan, and I'm certainly not a fan of winter. I'm not really sure, why in the world I've lived in the Midwest, and especially in my senior years, which are coming quicker than I would imagined them coming, and certainly quicker than I am thankful or wanting. So I think I'd rather be someplace warm, but unfortunately that's not going to be a part of my life, at least not in the near future that I'm aware of. I don't have any big plans, or that I don't have a bunch of land someplace warm. So I will live in the place I live and be thankful for it, but I definitely don't like the cold, and I even more don't like the snow. I spent a couple hours last night, me and the snowblower out in the driveway and in the yard trying to make things clear and get things going. Needless to say, I am not a fan. I am a fan of thankful for having a snowblower, though. That's not something that not everybody has, and I certainly didn't have for a number of years. So I am thankful for that snowblower, I can tell you. Even when the snow blows back in my face, I think to myself, you're not shoveling. So that's pretty nice. Hey, now before we jump into this morning's Friday morning devotion, tell me this. Are you like me? Would you rather be someplace that's not cold and snow? Or do you like the cold and snow? And if you're not liking the cold and snow, like I'm not liking the cold and snow, comment below and tell me where you'd rather be. I got to be honest with you. It's really hard for me to say which, because I've been to a few really nice places. But one place particular I really enjoyed and think it'd be a lot of fun to be during the wintertime, and that is out in Arizona. I really enjoyed my time in Arizona. I've been there, I think, 3 times now. So I'm very thankful for the times I've had to be able to visit there. I think Arizona would be my number one spot. Next in line would probably be San Antonio, Texas, where it was 70 degrees when we flew in back a few years ago when we visited Texas. We drove up to Austin, and it was, needless to say, it was 32 degrees just as 2 hours north. So it's obvious Texas gets some cold weather in the northern portion of it, and some snow from my understanding. And I'm sure that as you get up in Arizona in the northern sections, you might run into some of that as well. They say you can find all 5 seasons in Arizona, so I'm going to take their word for it. I've not seen all 5 seasons in Arizona. I have enjoyed visiting Phoenix and Scottsdale and the Grand Canyon. We love to go in there, and I just forgot the place that we stayed. It was a blast to be there, though. So where would you rather be than be here in the cold and snow? Comment below, and if you're a snow person, go ahead and comment below. The rest of us will just sit and cry and look at your comments, all right? So let's get the Friday morning devotion, and now we're in part 2 of the series Perspectives. Last week, I began this series with these thoughts. Number 1, I am limited by my humanness and my sin, and so are you. This is not a popular thought. This is not a popular opinion. I don't even think it's an opinion, but I know that others think it's just an opinion. It is not popular to say that you and I are born in sin, and that you and I have an issue with sin, the vast time that we're breathing here on this earth, even those who follow Jesus Christ. That there is this argument, this battle going on inside of you between the good that you would do and the bad that you wished you didn't do. We are limited in our perspective by our humanness and our sin. Secondly, there are times when we don't think right. We think we are wise, but really we're quite foolish. Matter of fact, Paul actually commented on this in his letter to the church at Rome, specifically in the very first part of the letter, in what we call chapter 1 of the book of Romans. And he said, thinking they've become wise, they've become fools. And I've oftentimes wondered about this phrase, because there's situations I've seen where people thought they were doing the right thing, and man, they had 100%, maybe 110%, thought that they were right, only to find out down the road that they were wrong. And we can all find ourselves with this kind of thing going on, where we think we've got the right answer and find out it's not. But oftentimes there are situations when people are choosing things that are obvious, and they think they're wise, and yet we find out that they are not. They're quite foolish. And then the third thought I talked about last week is if you and I fail to see things through God's lens, God's perspective, we will actually add to an already difficult time that we have oftentimes here living in this life and on this earth. So that's what we talked about last week. Let's jump in this morning. Today I want to take a look at God's perspective of our choice making. When we make choices, I alluded to this at the end of last week, what's the rights or wrongs? How do we make choices? How do we make decisions? What do we do to make sure that we're making the right type of decisions? And so let me ask you just a couple of quick questions. What governs your thinking? What governs your thoughts? You say governs, what do you mean by that? What boundaries, what rules, whatever word you want to use, what do you use as a measuring stick for your thoughts to see whether or not they are thoughts that should or should not be pursued? And we can have thoughts that should and thoughts that should not be pursued. I guarantee you, we all are in a position sometimes where we have thoughts that should not be pursued. Again, we are limited by our humanness and our sin. When you make decisions then, is there a filter that you use to help you make the best decisions? Is there some filter? Is there some process? Is there something that you do that you say, okay, this is how I'm going to figure out if this is what the best decision would be? Well, this morning I want to talk to you about just a couple of thoughts that you might consider in your decision making in the future. The first thought is this: does God address this issue or this decision that I'm getting ready to make? Does God address this issue or this decision that I'm getting ready to make? And I want to talk to you basically, there's two ways in which God addresses life. Two ways that you and I can look to where we find that God addresses life. The first one is, excuse me. The first one is there some moral boundary that God has set up to give you and I some guidance as to what decisions to make? Is there some moral boundaries that God sets up that He says this is right or wrong? Let me give you an illustration. It's going to be an obvious illustration, but it's an illustration nonetheless. If I am thinking about getting to a place where that I want to steal money from the person who lives next door to me, or I want to steal something that they own, or I want to maybe harm them physically, it's obvious that those issues have already been addressed. You are told not to steal. We're told not to harm or to kill. So, knowing that, I cannot say, well, God wants me to go take the neighbor's stuff. Or God wants me to go kill this stupid man because if he continues like he's going, his stupidity is going to overrun his life. It is not our choice to make those type of decisions. Those decisions have actually been made for you. The question is, do you look at what God's point of view is or His perspective is concerning that issue? Do you honestly look and say, does God say this is wrong or right? And let me say this, I don't care who says what. I don't care who, whatever, in education we have, whatever, life experiences we have. Let me just say this loud and clear. When God says something is wrong, it is always wrong. And that's hard. That's hard for me. That's hard for you. Because sometimes what God says is wrong, we think, now what is really wrong with this? Or we might say, well, I think maybe 80% that's wrong, but there's some 20% over here that I could make a choice in. And the reality is that we need to ask ourselves, are there some moral boundaries that God has set up for you and I to basically give standards that you and I can use to make decisions by? We need God's perspective, his moral boundaries to make the best decisions. The second is basically through what I call principled thinking. Principled thinking. I encourage folks all the time, every so often, just take a month, maybe a couple of months, 3 or 4 months. You don't have to do it forever. This is not something you do so when you get done with it, you can say, hey, I'm a good Christian. But this is something that will help you in your thinking. And that is just to go back and read the old book of Proverbs. In the Old Testament, the book of Proverbs, there's 31 chapters, and you can set a reading plan. It's real easy to read through the book of Proverbs. On the first date of the month, day 1, like February 1st, read chapter 1. February 2nd, read chapter 2, and so on up until the end. And February only has 28 days. So on the 28th day, or maybe the days previously, you read a couple of chapters instead of just one as you finish up that month. So if you do that, I guarantee you there are lots of amazing principles found in the book of Proverbs. Matter of fact, there's some interesting statements in the book of Proverbs. You ought to go check some of them out. You'll say, wow, I couldn't believe that's actually in the Bible. But many of the phrases you and I think about that we come up with or we've heard, we didn't come up with many of them. Solomon wrote them in Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes thousands of years ago, and we're still repeating those things that were written even before Christ arrived, even to this day. So let me ask you this question. Do you pass your decisions through these two ways so God can help you choose the right path for your life? You know, you need to make sure you do that. Let me just say real quick some ways in which that you and I can pass that through, this idea of principled thinking. One of my favorite proverbs is Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And basically, you and I both know this, that if someone's angry and you just pop off back at them, it does not help and normally incites more anger. Now, I'm not saying that every time that you talk kindly to someone who's angry, they're not going to be angry anymore. It's going to fix the situation. I wished it was the case. That's why principled thinking is not something that is moral or the morality of from the standpoint of rights and wrongs. There are times folks are angry for the right reasons. Now, those are maybe few and far between. We could have a conversation about that someday if you want. Give me a call. We'll have a Coke together. But I'm just telling you this. There are times at which that anger is justified. And so when someone is angry and they're justified, you can talk soft to them forever. There are people whose anger is unjustified, and you can talk nicely to them, and it's not going to change the circumstance. What it is going to do, it is going to allow you to make the choice to be on the right path according to what God has said. So when you think about principled thinking, you need to think about making the decisions you have through that lens of principled thinking and God's moral boundaries. If today is a day that basically you're going to make some decisions. And when you make those decisions, you need to realize that God knows better than us and that we need to trust him and live according to what he's given us for those decisions. The cool part is that in Psalms 34, it basically says that if you trust in the Lord, if you delight in him, that he will give you the desires of your heart, which allows you and I, if there's no moral boundaries and there's no principled thinking that's being violated, then you and I can make the decision that's on our heart. And God actually allows us to do that and oftentimes blesses those decisions. You may find someone that disagrees with you, but in the long run, eternity specifically in mind, you're going to be glad you make decisions by these two items that addresses the reality of what does God say? What does God have to guide us when we're talking about decisions in a particular issue? One particular decision I want just real quickly to throw at you is this. If you don't know Jesus Christ as Savior, then that is the one decision that you should make. And I want to say to you that no matter how many good decisions you make, If you have not trusted Jesus Christ, no matter how good you are, no matter how many good things you do or good things you choose, without Christ, unfortunately, heaven is not the place you're headed. I don't always like that. It's uncomfortable to say that, but I didn't make that the reality. I always jokingly say I didn't make the rules. John, who was one of the best and closest friends Jesus probably had, he said this: if you have the Son, you have life. If you don't have the Son, you don't have life. That's a capital S on Son, referring to Jesus. If you have Jesus, you have life. If you don't have Jesus, you do not have life. You might be living, breathing, and the blood pumping through your veins, but in the long run, you are spiritually dead. And if you leave this life that way, you will not find yourself in heaven. If you want to read about this whole idea of being good enough, I would love to send you a little small book. It's an hour read. If you'll just comment below and say, Bill, send me the book on being good enough, then I will send you that book. If you're watching this beyond this date, maybe in the recorded form, if you'd rather message me, go to my Facebook page, Bill Sparks, hit the message and message me and ask me to send you the book on how good is good enough. And I would love to send you that book at my expense, cost you nothing. Would love to send that book to you. So now, the first thought was, does God address this issue? And we looked at two ways that God addresses the issues of life. This second question, or this second thought, I want you to consider in your decision making is this really simple question. And the question is it wise? That means basically, are you willing? And we need to ask the question. And it's what Andy Stanley terms as the best question ever. And that's the question, is it wise? And so when we face a decision, this may not be a moral issue where it's right or wrong. We might be in that we can choose zone. And so we find that we can choose zone, and we think to ourselves, things are going just great. I can make the choice. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't see any principles. And yet there's some great questions we can ask ourselves that will help us make sure that we make wise decisions. Okay, so let me just throw a few questions at you, ones that you could join up, you could write down, you could join me in asking yourself like I ask myself, okay? One of the questions is this: in light of my weaknesses, is this really a wise decision? For instance, you may have a weakness for things that has controlled your life at one time or another. Maybe relational, maybe some substance. And so you're in a position where the decision you're getting ready to make is going to put you at a compromised position. And in light of your weakness, is it really wise for you to do that? See, that's a great question. That takes out all it puts it basically personal. It takes out all the, well, what does somebody say about this? Makes it very personal. You know your weaknesses. And if you don't know your weaknesses, ask your family. They love to make fun of them. Ask your best friends because they see them. In light of your weaknesses, are you making the best decision? In light of your strengths, are you making the best decision? Some people choose a softer, easier path when their strengths and their abilities are much better, but they'd rather not have the hassle. And so they make a decision, and they oftentimes choose easier rather than the road they should choose. Sometimes your strengths show you as to whether or not it's a wise decision or a wise path to take. In light of my past, in other words, if you've struggled with marriage and you've been married a couple of times, it's not a good idea necessarily to just go date. You might go date, find someone you want to marry, and then as a result, you might end up repeating the patterns you did in the first two marriages. You need to find out who you are. Spend some time looking at who you are. Spend some time maybe finding out why you've made some decisions you've made within the relationships. And then when you do find someone, you'd be really wise to go someplace and ask someone else to help guide you through the process of making the decision to get married again. Or maybe in light of your future, where you want to be in 5 years, is this really wise for me to make this decision? It's a great question to ask. In light of my relationship abilities, is this good? In light of my strengths in my profession, is this a good idea? What questions could you ask? There are literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of questions where you can ask the question in light of something about me or something about the circumstance, something about the other person, something along the way. In light of that, even though there doesn't seem to be a moral right or wrong or a principled problem here, is this wise because of who I am? And this makes your decision making much more personal, and then you can make better decisions. You say, I don't know what's wise all the time. That's not a problem. Seek someone. Scripture even says that a man basically makes good decisions by many counsel. So seek out a counselor, a trusted friend, a pastor, whoever you feel like makes good decisions. Don't choose the guy who's in jail making bad decisions to ask your questions to. Let him find out on his own, through his own mistakes, how to make better decisions. Hey now, I just want to tell you, have a great Friday, have a great weekend, and remember, you can make good decisions with a little guidance in your life, and you can make even better decisions as you follow that guidance and you walk in some wise ways, some principled ways, and in the boundaries God has set up. All right, make sure to comment below. Where would you rather be than the snow and cold? And if you're going to say, I want to be in the snow and cold, just go right ahead and comment. We will not make fun of you. Okay, I might. Someone else might. I'm sorry. But no, I don't like being in the cold and snow. But I appreciate those that do. I did when I was younger, but right now everything hurts when it's cold and snowing, and I don't like it. Comment below. Let me know where you'd rather be. Like I said, Arizona probably, and Phoenix area specifically, would be where I think I would rather be than this cold right now. So till next week, make sure you share this with others. Tell your friends about Friday morning devotions. Send them a link in your email, or share it on your social media. And let's continue to make good decisions and see things from God's perspective. See you next week when we do week number 3 of the series Perspectives. God bless. Y'all have a great day now. Bye-bye.